Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Adam, and if you're watching this video, you're either a fan of aviation, you enjoy flying, or you're wanting to learn how to fly for a possible future career. Either way, I think the next three videos you're going to find an invaluable resource guide. The videos are kind of what's required, your do's and don'ts, where to go, who to listen to, what's available, and where do you start in the flight simulator world. And a little couple of disclaimers right now. We're going to be talking about flight simulation only. We're not talking about real world flying. We're not talking about training as a real pilot. Purely just virtual, purely flight simulation from here on out. A lot of the flight simulators, a lot of the flight simulation software procedures are lifelike, are identical to what real pilots would go through, but it is by no means a replacement for real world training. Secondly, I'm not affiliated with anybody. I'm not endorsed by anybody. I'm not trying to push a particular brand or product onto anybody's laps. I don't get paid for this by anybody. I'm not been told to say this by anybody. I'm purely putting these videos together as a fan of the community and wanting to help those who basically are either entering into the world or maybe just looking for more answers for their questions. Either way, I think if you've been doing this for a long time or you've just started, I think you're going to find these next three videos very interesting, very helpful, more of a kind of definitive walkthrough guide, like an A to Z of flight simulation and the world. So I mean, this video is just purely an introduction. Introduction to me, who I am, and what the next three videos are going to be. So once we've gone through the introduction, I'll talk about a bit about me. If you don't wish to hear about me, just skip through this one and go straight to the next one. All three videos links are in the description below. The next video, or the first one, we're purely going to be finding out what kind of flight simmer are you. It's going to really dictate how you buy your flight simulator and what kind of flight simulator you're going to build. Some people might not even know what kind of flight simulator they are. I really do believe that there are only 2 or 3 different types of flight simmers, and they all have different setups. They use different products. They look at this completely different as well. And you're going to fall into one of them 2 or 3 categories, and knowing which category you fall into is crucial into saving you a whole heap of money. It's so easy to spend money in this genre, in this hobby, in this world. So that's another reason for this series, is to help you spend your money the way you want to without having to go down dead ends and going, oh gosh, wish I hadn't bought that now. That was a bit of a waste. So that's really what the first video is. It's a kind of what flight simmer are you. The second video is purely about software and the hardware of this world. It's going to help you, or assist you rather, in making your decision. Again, I'm not trying to push any brands. I'm not trying to tell anybody of what to buy. I definitely won't be saying you need this, otherwise you're a chump. You basically are going to be making up your own minds based off the information that we've got here. It's all the information in any video, any link, any fact is accurate of 2018. The further on in the future we go from that date, the less likely links will work. Information might change, and I implore you to do your own research, to check out people yourself, to listen to your own inner voice before making your decision to purchase or part with your money. It's up to you at the end of the day of where you want to go with your flight simulator. I'm just giving you the options that are available. The third video is purely once you've established your hardware, your software, what kind of sim you're going to make. It's basically putting it all together and utilizing it to its best. Where do you go for online resources or real world books maybe, or utilities, and the community itself, which goes far beyond that. The sort of different gatherings each year. So there's a lot to get through, to be honest. We're going to cover every aspect of flight simulation. We're going to move all the rocks out of the way, leave no stone unturned. if you've been in this for as long as I have, or if you're a developer, you might even find these interesting. You might have questions, or you might even find out new information. Who knows? But again, this is primarily aimed at people who are just stepping into the world, but we're covering everything. If you've got any questions, I say in every video, leave your questions in the comments, and in a few months time I'll come back to these videos and do a Q&A, and that way we can wrap everything up, and this can become the definitive A to Z of flight simulation. So like, who am I? You know, who's this chump you're listening to? It's like, who's this Jack? You know, well, my name's Adam. And in the real world, I used to be a photographer, sorry. I used to also, I'm a trained celebrant, but currently I'm a writer. I write children's fictional books. I've been doing that, well, I've been doing that all my life, but I've been published now for the last year. I've got a part-time job as well, working in the cinema that I grew up in, as it were. So I love doing that as well in my spare time. And then by night, I am a flight simulator, or a flight simmer, or a pilot in training. But sadly, in the real world, I'll never be able to fly solo because I also sadly suffer from epilepsy. So I can never fly solo, which means I can never pass my private license, my private pilot's license, that is, which means I can never be a commercial airliner, because you need a private pilot's license to become a commercial airliner. I can fly planes with a person or a trained pilot, and I can take the wheel, as it were. I can take the stick, the yoke, and I can fly the plane only if I have somebody with me. So solo flights are out, which means that's like the requirements for passing your private pilot's license is a solo flight. So unfortunately I can't obtain that, but I can still learn all the procedures. I can still learn how to fly a plane. I can still go to these destinations and achieve the accomplishment of going, I know how to fly a 737. Again, it's not a substitute for real world training. It's purely a simulation. It's purely a hobby, and it should never be used as training in the real world, or a substitute for training, sorry. It's more of an enhancement for training in the real world. I first got the flight bug when I was very young. My dad died when I was 4, and we went out to America and lived in Texas. So I flew frequently from the age of 4 onwards, and I absolutely loved it. I loved takeoff, the roar of the engines, and that turbulent feeling when you're taking off into the air and you're pulled back into your seat. Absolutely love that. The peace and tranquility up in the skies, and seeing everything from up high gives you a serenity that is just magical. And you drift down to earth, high on cloud 9, wishing you were back up in the sky. Can't wait for your next flight. And at the age of 8, I think it was, I got my first flying lesson. I flew a C-152, and I remember the hour lesson I had. I had to do some classroom stuff first, but then I got 20 minutes or 30 minutes actually flying the plane, and I absolutely loved it, and I could not wait to do that again. And then I developed epilepsy, so unfortunately that was just now an unreachable goal until the year 2000, and Flight Simulator 2000 came along from Microsoft, and I thought, got a PC, why not? Let's give it a try. And I popped in. I remember getting the software from the shop, and popping it in, and I see a Concorde on the cover, and I got the pilot handbook, and it's really technical. It's really detailed. I'm like, oh my gosh. It's like, it's got an instructor called Rob Mikado, and he's going, hi there, welcome, I'm your instructor, and you're gonna learn to fly. And then they hook you up with John and Martha King, who run a real world flight school, and they've trained thousands of pilots in the real world, and you learn how to fly a plane. And in the book, in the pilot's handbook, it was really detailed. It taught you instruments, it taught you approaches, it taught you turns and takeoffs and landings, and it was like a 10-step tutorial, and it was really detailed, I thought. And I think at that time, the software had reached the point of it could simulate the aircraft's instrumentations and flight dynamics very accurately. But I mean, again, it was very basic visually. Didn't have a virtual cockpit. It was 2D panels. You could fly the Concorde and learn how to do that and learn how complicated it is, but it was very basic in today's terms. And it wasn't until 4 years later that it got replaced by Flight Simulator 2004: A Century of Flight, which is a very special product because it's still supported today. Developers still support 2004, not actively, they're not, and not everybody, but 10% of the community still uses that as their sole flight simulator software. So developers still think of it when they're developing, and it's usually called FS9. And it was great because it included planes like DC-3, I think it was, or DC-4. It included biplanes, and it included a whole host of planes from the last 100 years. And it was a real good product. And it was really the first time that you saw a bit more detail in the sim, in the textures. But it took about 45 years, 4 or 5, not 45, 4 or 5 years until it got replaced again by FSX. I got the deluxe edition on that one, which had the acceleration pack built into it, which just gave you extra planes and performance. But it now was becoming a very demanding piece of software for your hardware, for your PC. It meant that you really had to have the top specs. Now, there was not a computer on the planet back then that could actually utilize the best out of FSX. Everybody really struggled with their performance on their computer to run this beast of a program. It's still actively supported, right today. In the flight sim community, developers still make products for this. It's evolved now online, and it's become the Steam edition. Steam bought the rights to sell the game. Well, they call it a game because at the end of the day, it's not like you can use it for real world training, so it is deemed as a game. But by the community, it's definitely no game. It's no joke. It's definitely serious because you're going through all the procedures. You're going through everything to do in an actual 737 you have to do in this simulator. It's a simulation, really. It's a simulation, not a game. But in Windows eyes, it was a game. In Microsoft eyes, it was a game. So it's now evolved into the Steam edition, but Flight Simulator X was a landmark in flight simulation. It really had high definition textures. It had ATC. It had dynamic weather. It had loads going for it, and it was the reigning champion for a good few years, for at least 10 years, until X-Plane came along, until other editions came out. In fact, Microsoft, I believe in 2012, stopped developing and completely shut down their flight simulator department. They sold the license to sell the simulator to Steam, and so now you've got Flight Simulator X Steam Edition, and it's a carbon copy, really. It's exactly the same, but they just sell it online now rather than in a box. They sold the engine, the actual hard code of the simulator, to Lockheed Martin, who are a plane manufacturer, who have moved into software now, and they've developed their own flight simulator, which real world pilots actually train on. And now they've licensed it for consumers as well, and it's become Prepared 3D. And then also Dovetail bought the rights to continue and further develop FSX. And they were building a really good simulator, Flight Sim World. It had a lot of stuff built into it that you had to buy in other simulators externally. It was really loved by the fans, but it was more as an entertainment package than a serious package. Like FSX was a bit more serious than FS World was, because FS World, it put you through like a flight school. It only did general aviation. It didn't take that leap forward to get released either. It was only in early access, but it was fantastic. I bought it. I had it, and so I can still use it through Steam if I wanted to, but unfortunately they discontinued it. They stopped it. I don't think you can get it online anymore, which is a shame because it was great. So, I mean, they're all the simulators I've owned. I've never had an X-Plane, so I don't have any experience with that. I've never had Aerofly or a combat flight simulator. And there are other ones that are coming out. There are other flight simulators as well, but in the next few videos, we're just talking about the main ones. I remember the very first time I even saw Flight Sim was like Windows 95 or something. It was really something basic. My grandmother's neighbor had it, and I was just like, whoa, you know, this is cool. I never got Flight Simulator 2002, the professional edition, though, so I don't know what's in that as opposed to what's in 2004, what's missing from that one, sorry, or, you know, how advanced far from 2000 it was. I skipped that one, basically. So, that's me. That's the 3 videos in the future, and basically, yeah. So we're going to get on to the next video now. Thanks for listening to this. If you've made it this far, appreciate it. And if there's any links in the description below of anybody else's videos that I've borrowed or anything like that, go check them out. I highly recommend you doing your own research, you doing your own thinking, and using this as a total guide, not the gospel. Okay. Thanks for listening, and in the next video we're going to find out what kind of flight simmer you are, and we're going to perhaps save you a little bit of money and discover which path you're going to take. Until the next one, see you later guys, bye bye.